I've been asked to record this, so I hope nobody minds. Alright, so as she said, my name is Nathan Cox. I'm a born and raised RVA type of person. I grew up in Richmond, was a river rat growing up. Moved out of Richmond when I was going to 8th grade to Mechanicsville, which is where I concluded my education. I ended up joining the Army in 2006. And I got out of the Army in 2009. I joined as infantry, spent about 14 months in Iraq. Before I had joined the Army, ironically enough, I had been trying to become a police officer. Not a lot of people know that. There's a little irony in that as well. I had two ideas. I had never really had a good experience with police officers growing up, but I had this idea of the type of cop that I wanted to be that was unlike any that I had met up until that point in time. So I had applied to like Richmond, Hanover, Henrico, and couldn't ever seem to get past the written exam part. So half the reason why I joined the Army was so I could have that experience, because I knew that experience would help me become a police officer. The other half of the reason why I joined the Army was kind of that cliche, I wanted to fight for my country type of deal. And before I joined the Army, I was, for the most part, politically apathetic, except I had my two main gripes with the government was taxation and the police state, or the police. And I had a kind of a big epiphany and awakening while I was in Iraq. I heard, that was during the 2008 election, and I heard about an old man, a doctor named Ron Paul, who had a lot of things to say about the ideas of liberty and peace and non-aggression. And they all made a lot of sense to me. And that's pretty much the message that I advocate now, is basically civil rights, freedom, peace, and non-aggression and stuff like that. So I was deployed from October of 2007 to December of 2008. Never got shot at, never had to shoot anybody, thankfully. I had this epiphany about 3 months into country. So after I had this kind of awakening, I just wanted to kind of get home in one piece along with my buddies. But before that, I was pretty hell-bent on, seeing action and being involved in action and stuff like that. So as I got out, I was already networking with people that were like-minded before I got out of Iraq. I got out the summer of '09, and I quickly got involved in various campaigns and other stuff. In 2010, I think it was, is when there was a pretty big and kind of an infamous incident that I had with the VSU police. Some of you may or may not be familiar with that. I got pulled over by a VSU police officer. I was driving on 7th Street, I think, headed to the 64, and I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and I saw a VSU cop, and as I was driving the speed limit, and I happen to have a megaphone in my car, right, because I'm an activist. So I pulled out the megaphone, and all I said was, "Stop harassing people, we pay your paychecks," as I drove by. He didn't like my freedom of speech, so he left the traffic scene, caught up with me just before I got on the interstate, and proceeded to pull me over, which I was camera ready at that point, got the whole thing on tape, it's on YouTube. It was a young VSU officer. I'm not sure how many years of experience he had, and he came up to me, the normal license and registration. While I was getting that form, I said, "Do you mind if I ask why you pulled me over, sir?" And he couldn't give me an answer. He started stuttering, and I said, "Well, let me guess, you didn't like my freedom of speech." And so he proceeded to write me a ticket for obstruction of justice, which I refused to sign. Told him I wanted to see a supervisor. Waited about 20 minutes for a supervisor, and when the supervisor, during that 20 minutes, we found out that he actually called the city's Commonwealth Attorney to figure out what he could write me a ticket for. And he ended up changing the ticket to disorderly conduct, which I ended up signing after I spoke with the supervisor, which was also on camera, and tried to convince the supervisor to do the right thing and protect my rights, which didn't happen. So I was found guilty in General District Court for being a jerk, and we appealed that, and we won in appellate court, First Amendment rights. One of my attorney was Tom Roberts. He's a constitutional big shot in Richmond, who affiliates himself with the Rutherford Institute, which is located in Charlottesville, which I highly recommend. I like them much more than the ACLU. One of his arguments was, well, if my client would have said, you know, nice job, you're doing a great job today, he wouldn't have came after me, which is pretty logical. But he did, and we ended up settling out of court for 10 grand. I didn't see any of that money at all. Went to my attorney. So that was one kind of big incident that happened. There's been a string of other ones since. I got served a injunction by the Richmond police a couple years back for putting an article on my website, another First Amendment related issue. Somebody apparently had found a thumb drive that belonged to Richmond police that contained personnel information and other stuff. That person contacted me and another Cop Watch group and said, hey, I got this information, if you want it, you can have it. So the other information with the other, my friend who leads Richmond Cop Watch got a hold of the information before I did, uploaded the information, blogged about it, and all I did, I never downloaded, I never possessed the files. All I did was link to where this girl had uploaded the files so people could, you know, kind of follow the stepping stones and find these files if they wanted to search through them. So I got served an injunction for linking to these files. That injunction ended up being removed. And another kind of a bigger incident that I had over the last couple of years was with a state trooper named Melanie McKinney. She pulled me over in the summer of 2012. Oh, wait a minute, 13. It was Memorial Day weekend. Virginia State Police had all their cruisers out trying to generate revenue, as we know they do. I got pulled over for not having a front license plate displayed, and my inspection sticker was expired. I beat one of those tickets in court, and I was recording the entire time. I described it as the second most aggressive traffic stop that I had ever been in. As soon as she came to my door, she opened up the door and demanded that I got out. I was recording. She was like 5 foot tall. She pretty much assaulted me because she didn't want to be on camera, so I was trying to evade her, kind of walking around in circles. I was holding the phone above her head so she couldn't reach it. That's all on YouTube. And I ended up complying, unfortunately. I put the phone down just like I did here. That was leaning against my spoiler so I could continue to record. She kept on saying that my phone could be a gun. That was coming from one side of her mouth. The other side of her mouth, she acknowledged that it was a phone and that I was recording. So the traffic stop was like 30 minutes long. After she went back to her car, she had 3 other state troopers guard me on the side of the road for a half hour. When she walked back to her car, she touched my phone as she walked back and laid it face down in my car in the 100-degree heat that day, so it wouldn't record towards her direction. So after that, after I dealt with those tickets, I filed a FOIA request, got some pretty incriminating, I got her dash cam, I got her text messages that she was exchanging with the other people, got some pretty incriminating information. She admitted to her colleagues that she knew that my phone was not in fact a gun, but it was a phone, but she didn't want to be on YouTube, is what she said. So she had no problems violating my First Amendment rights because she didn't want to be on YouTube. And 2 years later, which transpired last year, she waited 2 years to file a lawsuit against me for defamation, which I still don't know what that's about. I think it was basically retaliation for her video now having over 500,000 views on YouTube, because the article and the video that I wrote, there was nothing defamatory in there. Thousands of people have read it. A number of attorneys have read it. There's nothing defamatory. I'm not in the habit of making defamatory statements against anybody. So long story short, she dismissed that voluntarily after she didn't show up to court for one, then it got appealed, and blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of some of the highlights of my instances with police over the last 4 or 5 years. Before I forget, my friend Danielle Lewis, probably none of y'all know her except for the professor, but she said that you're definitely her favorite professor here. And she and her attorney were the ones who represented me with the defamatory
Is that right?
case.
She graduated
Mm-hmm.
Great.
She's working for Stephen Lewis in Richmond, Bon Air.
Good.
So, let me see here. Anybody watch a show called The Good Wife? Heard of it? What do you think about it?
Love it.
Yeah, it's a great. Isn't it like a great legal show, in my opinion?
That's pretty good.
So before I forget, ex-Marine buddy of mine, recently wrote a book while he was in jail called Freedom. He was in jail for practicing his Second Amendment rights in D.C. That name might ring a bell to you. Anyway, he sent me a case of these books to give out to anybody who wants some for free, or wants one for free. So if you want some, I got more in the bag. Just feel free to get one after we're done. Also wanted to plug another book by Frederick Bastiat called The Law. I don't know if this is maybe recommended by any of the professors here or not, or if it's on a reading list. As you can see how small it is, I highly, highly, highly recommend this book, The Law by Frederick Bastiat. We're going to kind of get back to this maybe in a few minutes, but I have kind of almost a rhetorical question, but not really, because maybe at some point we can talk about it. But I'm curious to know what you guys think the law is, and if it's synonymous with codes or statutes or ordinances and stuff like that. Trying to think. Anybody got any questions so far?
I have a question.
Sure.
So your organization, what is its mission?
So our mission.
How is it structured? How is it run? Does it have a hierarchy to it? Does it have a legislative agenda? Does it have, so I'd be very, very curious about your organization and about how you see similar organizations interacting with various stakeholders to improve the operation of the criminal justice system, knowing that people have different views around the criminal justice system.
Those are great questions. Hopefully I can remember every single one. I was hoping a buddy of mine was going to come here from Winchester. He's kind of my legal expert, so to speak. He runs our sister site called The Full Court Press, which is a website y'all might really be interested in, thefullcourtpress.org. Basically, he focuses on the court system and the judicial aspect here in Virginia. But as far as what Virginia Cop Block and what Cop Block is all about, we advocate filming the police for matters of transparency, and it's an objective record or reference to any given situation going on. Cameras don't lie. The more cameras pointed at public servants, the better, in my opinion. We advocate peace and non-violence, non-aggression. It doesn't matter if somebody is a public servant wearing a badge and uniform or not. Kind of the tagline for Cop Block is what's on the back of my shirt: badges don't grant extra rights. All that means is there shouldn't be any double standards within law enforcement. There's a number of them. Cops kill people all the time, and they get away with it, unfortunately, quite often. And just because people wear a badge and work for the public doesn't mean they should have immunity or any less amount of personal responsibility than you or I, a private citizen. So we advocate for more transparency, more accountability, both in the law enforcement world and the judicial system world.
You take positions on Justice Department reports like Ferguson, the Darrell Wilson
situation? So to answer your question, I'm going to kind of answer it about more of the organizational aspect. We don't have a hierarchy. There is no membership base. Our organization is completely decentralized. So comparing it to something like the NAACP, where there's, you got to pay to be a member. There's like a hierarchy, the president, and all that stuff. We don't do that for a handful of reasons. Everybody is their own autonomous person. Kind of like you said a few minutes ago. Everybody has their own political ideas and philosophies, and that's the great thing about the cause for police accountability and transparency, is that really should bring everybody together wherever you fall in the political or philosophical scale. It's personal responsibility in a free society makes sense, and it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter if you're wearing a badge and a uniform or not. So to answer that question, as far as do we take stances on stuff like that, we don't take stance for for everybody, because like I said, everybody's their own autonomous person with their own opinion. But we might have people who affiliate themselves or who founded local or state chapters or who founded the national groups that might put out their opinion, but it doesn't speak for everybody. So I don't know if that's the best way to put it. So whenever I speak for Virginia Cop Block, I don't speak for all the people who self-affiliate, or who self-describe as supporters, because we have supporters that range from current and ex-law enforcement, soccer moms. It doesn't matter the demographic, and all those demographics come from different backgrounds, whether it's economic or political or whatever. Where can I find more water? I see them right there.
Okay, yeah, you can have mine.
Oh,
So, okay, guys, let's spur a little discussion. Do you have questions for? We really wanted to look at this in terms of Ferguson. So, if we look at this structurally, this is not a class. Students aren't required to read particular works. But I think we all have a general acquaintanceship with what's happened in Ferguson, Missouri, right? And so there are disputes and challenges around our criminal justice system at the moment. They have to do with revenue building, they have to do with race relations, they have to do with the militarization, or what's alleged to be the militarization of the police. So with regard to Ferguson, apparently the Defense Department has been issuing militarized vehicles to local law enforcement all throughout the country. So in order for this to be a conversation, so Nathan's got a relational reaction from the group. Does anybody have any kind of ideas, insights, thoughts about what the country's facing in terms of, I mean, this is a very, I would say this is a top-level political debate. This is a debate that will be talked about in the presidential election. I mean, it's risen to the surface of a national discourse. So we have stakeholders, like a decentralized, it sounds similar to maybe an Occupy Wall Street in that you're decentralized. It doesn't sound like you have a specific legislative agenda. But we're about to be lawyers who enter into the arena in whatever capacity, and sort of having a discussion about the criminal justice system seems pretty significant. It is the domestic monopoly on the legitimate use of force. So that's what a criminal justice system is. It is where we transfer via a democratic process to a group of individuals with badges a monopoly on the legitimate use of force. So it goes to the very, very core of a democracy. It's an elemental component to it. So has anybody read Ferguson's reports or stayed apprised of them?
I was not going to say anything about Ferguson, but just with your organization, do you think it's a lack of cop knowledge of like what rights they have, or do you think it's like individual cops abusing the system?
I think it's a combination of both. I think there's a bunch of cowboy cops out there who know that that because their friends are going to investigate them if they get in trouble, that they probably won't get in trouble. I also think that there probably is some sort of lack of training as far as training cops on, because law enforcement has turned into something completely different than what it used to be. Cops used to be called peace officers, and they really used to focus more on protecting people's rights rather than generating revenue and stuff like that. So I think it's a combination of both. the last, as far as Ferguson goes, and I'm gonna discuss why I handed out those packets here before the end of this. What time? How long is this? An hour?
10 till
10 till 1? Okay. So the last time I was interviewed by the news was last month, and they were asking me because as far as Virginia Coppock having legislative prerogatives, like I said, as collectively we don't because it's decentralized. But I know I have agendas when it comes to legislation, and I reached out to over a dozen Virginia legislators before the season started, trying to get a few things amended in certain bills. One of them was an amendment in the Virginia Freedom of Information Act request. So we have a pretty good statute here. Unfortunately, right now it's set up where if I wanted to FOIA a cop and find out how many complaints he has against him, what his history of misconduct is, important information like that should be available to the public is not available to the public, and they'll cite some little loophole saying it's a personnel record or something like that. And in my opinion, if you have a cop that has a history of complaints, a history of violence, or a history of misconduct, this information that in my opinion, that's a safety concern, and that information should be available to the public. So that was something that I was hoping to get changed this year, and I didn't have a whole lot of luck reaching out to people. But that's why I don't really dabble too much in the legislative process too much these days. So what was the other thing I wanted to say? Ferguson. I didn't read a whole bunch of reports, but I read that there was a bunch of the feds found out there was a bunch of underlying racism in the department, and I think they found that out through all the revenue that they were generating and where that revenue was coming from, which was mostly minority, which is pretty typical, I think, in any city. Which is why when we handed out these packets, nearly 10,000 of them, I purposely targeted housing projects in Richmond to try to educate people who maybe might be lacking education. As far as why I was interviewed last month, I was interviewed because a state legislator here in Virginia apparently introduced a bill. They were hoping to mandate that all police officers wear body cams. And they wanted my or Virginia Coppock's take or opinion on that. I said that I did and did not support the bill, and the reasons why was because I do like the idea of police officers wearing cameras. It protects themselves and it protects other people. The reason why I did not support it is because the legislator, for whatever reason, was hoping or wanted the funding to come from the federal government, which is already bankrupt. It's where we got like a $15 trillion debt. So that's really the main reason why I didn't support it. In my opinion, the state as a whole or the local departments can simply readjust their budgets, and instead of requesting tanks and a bunch of assault weapons, they can request a couple $1,000s or $20,000 worth of cameras. I don't think that there was actually right before I was interviewed for that, there was a cop, I think in New Mexico, who was wearing a body cam, shot a guy in the back 30 feet away. The guy he was running, shot the guy in the back 30 feet away, and he was wearing a body cam. So I brought that up in the interview, saying that body cams still will not prevent or necessarily prevent tragedies or police misconduct related matters. I told the media that yeah, it's a step in the right direction. I think it would help improve things as far as helping curb misconduct, but I think that changing the way internal investigations take place, I think, would be a much better solution. Right now there's internal investigations which are a farce and they're a joke. Basically it's like a bunch of their buddies investigating themselves. There's a tremendous conflict of interest, and that should be eliminated when it comes to serious matters like, a cop doing XYZ to a person. There should be a complete elimination of that. There's our Northern Virginia Coppock chapter along with another Citizens for Accountability group, have been pushing for a Citizens Review Board. And there's probably different ways people could figure out the structure, something like that, whether it's similar to like a jury selection or whether it's some sort of actual committee that whatever. But in my opinion, it should be an independent investigation that has no ties back to that particular cop or police department that should investigate cops in matters or questions of wrongdoing or misconduct. So that's what I said about that. So.
Yeah, I have a question about kind of the body cams. I've heard that idea done a lot. I've also heard that it could time with the FOIA exemptions, though, where they would take whatever footage from a particular incident that was reported, and they would put it basically in a personnel file, so it'd be an exemption. But with Virginia having that exemption, are there states that you've heard that don't have that exemption for personnel files? Like, is there something that you can compare to, like a FOIA from another state that would be good for Virginia to have something like that?
That's a great question. I haven't gone state by state to determine that. However, and as y'all probably already know, I don't know what level, are y'all like seniors or what?
Second and third.
Okay.
First years.
So y'all probably already know then that the way that you would go about getting that information, personnel records and conduct, would only be through a discovery, which means you'd have to be involved in criminal proceedings. But obviously, that, like I said, that's something we're trying to change. So to answer your question, no, I haven't gone state by state to try to figure that out, and I don't know. I have a feeling it's probably very similar in most of the states. Yes.
You've mentioned a couple of things, kind of like legislatively trying to get bills passed, and then looking at the packet, it seems like you try to inform people of their rights and things such as that. Do you guys try to work collaboratively with the police at all to maybe implement trainings to almost prevent these things from happening because they know how to protect the rights of the people they're arresting?
I would not mind having those type of interactions and engagements with the police, but the police simply just don't like people like me and people who advocate for accountability. The police and people who worship the police unequivocally, because people like me call for accountability or personal responsibility, sometimes or often people, including the police or families of the police or whomever, will intentionally mischaracterize us as simply anti-police or a bunch of immature police haters, and that's far from the truth. That's not who I am. I'm a Christian. I advocate for peace and non-aggression. I advocate that when people do have conversations with the police, that they're productive and they're not profanity-laced or disrespectful, because we want to change people's minds through peaceful persuasion, and we're not going to change anybody's minds, whether it's somebody like you or somebody in uniform, if we're saying derogatory, disrespectful stuff like that. So, we're a representative for a message. I'm a representative for a message, and in order for me to effectively communicate that to anybody, I've got to do it tactfully and respectfully and stuff like that. So we haven't to date had any sort of sit-downs with the police. I know that, I guess it was last month, there was something sort of like that with the Richmond police and there was something like Justice for RVA group. It made the news. There was some sort of forum that was going on. And the Richmond police were trying to give an opportunity for a dialogue with anybody who came to the forum. However, their dialogue was basically people writing questions down on a piece of paper and then somebody else asking those questions. So I thought that for the most part, that was just theatrical PR, really.
So like on your website, you will post like the YouTube videos and there's blogs and stuff like that about these negative encounters with police. Do you also, or have you ever thought about like doing the opposite, where you take good examples of law enforcement, abiding by the law and treating the citizens they should be, and potentially like exalting those in the sense that this is how it should be, this is the example we want it to look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Every time, I'm not the only person who runs the Facebook page. I have almost a dozen people now. Yes, anytime we see good examples of good behavior from cops, we absolutely do that because we want to promote those good things and exemplify them and kind of set them on a stool in hopes that other people will follow or other cops will follow those examples. So yeah, we do that. We don't have like a special page on our website that's dedicated for that. We do have a special page that's titled "Welcome LEOs," Welcome Law Enforcement Officers. For cops who are viewing our page, there's information that they can check out and stuff like that. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't. The instances of bad behavior by cops seems to be more than the good behavior. So it's harder to find sometimes that those good articles and good stories. But anytime that somebody sends us something or I stumble on something like that, yeah, we absolutely do highlight that and encourage that type of good behavior. Yeah.
Questions?
Yes.
And so, in light of how you want to encourage law-abiding behavior, you want to be respectful towards the police, so you can be productive. Just given what happened in Ferguson, and given that Michael Brown did strong-arm a store and did curse off a police officer and threaten him, how should, in your opinion, had Officer Wilson should have acted?
Those are good and interesting questions. I don't even know if it was ever proven that he did strong arm the store. I know there was some debate about that. As far as that's really a hard question for me to answer because I wasn't there, and I don't feel like I do know the facts of what happened. I really can't unequivocally trust the police report. But from my understanding, Brown was unarmed, and although he might have weighed more, maybe than Mr. Wilson, I think that there probably could have been maybe non-lethal measures taken. When I joined before I went to Iraq, I had a feeling that I would be engaged or had the possibility to be engaged in more non-lethal situations than lethal. So I took it upon myself to buy non-lethal items like a baton, a collapsible baton, a taser, and some other stuff which I never had to use. But that was because I didn't want to have to kill somebody if I didn't have to. But there's a lot of situations where police kill people where I think that they could have used non-lethal force to de-escalate the situation. Like there was a recent guy who had a screwdriver. He was not mentally there all the way. He had a screwdriver. Him and his mom stepped out of the house. Within about 5 seconds, the 2 or 3 cops there lit him up because of a screwdriver. That's just absurd in my opinion. If you're scared of a screwdriver, you're a coward and you shouldn't be a cop. I don't know if that's the best way to answer your question, but in my opinion, and again, I don't know how much of a scuffle ensued, but try to use non-lethal force if at all possible.
I just kind of want some clarification on your contact with that VCU officer.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had any personal contact with that specific officer, or was your megaphone message kind of directed at the police as a whole?